We are still discussing the appeal, and we are now at public comment. So each member of the public will have up to 5 minutes to speak to address the council. I have several slips. If you'd like to speak, you can give a slip to our city clerk. We'll start off with Paul Buscow.
Paul Buscow, Brisbane resident. Thank you, council. So, like other projects in Brisbane, I come out to understand it and then make a comment on it. And this project in particular, I was involved when they first started talking with the Planning Commission about their plans and ideas. And, you know, it goes a long way to satisfy an urgent need in this community. I understand there's like 100 seniors waiting to get into senior housing in Brisbane. So, you know, 16 is a big number. I know parking is an issue, but, you know, parking is an issue throughout Brisbane. And, you know, if you go down to the senior center here, I don't think I've ever seen spaces all loaded up on San Francisco Street or visitation for guests or anything that's going on there. You know, I live at 532 Alvarado, and I have the Hilltop apartments and complexes. There's the apartments at Klamath and Visitation. So while we have higher density within the residential zones, I don't think I've ever noticed any impacts as far as parking. But I think the plan's great. I think, you know, any resident could build a home that's 32 feet, so it doesn't necessarily need to be an apartment complex that would be bigger than most of the smaller homes in that area. So I thought when the Planning Commission made their decision, they based it on, you know, the criteria that was set before them, and I don't think anything's being asked over and above what is allowed. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Linda Parker.
Good evening. I just wanted to say that there's a few of us who are getting up there in age, and we're going to be, well, I'm retired, and I'm finding that there's going to be a day that I need a place to live. I won't want to be taking care of my big home and the gardens and all that. So we have a great need for, you know, senior housing. So I'm all in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Bostrom.
Good evening, Honorable Council. Anyway, my name is Dave Bostrom, and I'm one of the owners of the subject property.
Dave, you could speak in the microphone.
Anyway, I'd better. Okay. Anyway, the intent of this project was to do something nice for the community by creating a development that would align with the mutual goals of the city, the community, and the goals of the developer. We feel that we have done so by proposing to build a much-needed affordable housing. This counts toward the housing element, while also revitalizing downtown by building new architecture and retail shops. This project also has fulfilled all the mandated parking requirements. We chose senior housing because it seems to be a priority strategy that a lot of cities are currently using. The thought was that seniors could enjoy living close to the proximity of downtown Brisbane and its walkability to activities, shopping, parks. Seniors will also help patronize local businesses and help create a more robust and vibrant and safe 24/7 life around downtown. We feel that seniors might drive less and walk more, which would help reduce traffic and greenhouse gases. Some seniors will not drive or even own cars because of their age. The existing senior center has a waiting list of 50 plus seniors. Some people on the list will possibly die before housing is available to them. The proposed units are one bedroom, which makes them more affordable by nature. 3 of the units are low or income restricted affordable units. 1 is very low and 2 are low income. Units that do not have dedicated parking will also rent for less than the market value, which makes them more affordable. And we intend to invite senior tenants who do not drive to occupy these units. The project meets all the development standards, and we have been working for approximately 2 years to get this project to this stage. We have attended a voluntary workshop about 18 months ago to gain the input of the Planning Commission and the community. As a result, we feel that this is very careful and well thought out, and we've tried to strike a beneficial balance between what can be built and what should be built. I respectfully ask that you please deny the appeal and approve the proposed senior housing project at 3650 San Bruno Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kima Hayuk.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members. I'm before you tonight on behalf of 16 seniors. 16 seniors that will have an opportunity for better living conditions. 16 seniors who will be able to be closer to their families and who will be able to love and care for them. 16 seniors who will be able to participate and contribute to the revitalizing center of Brisbane. 16 seniors who will see their lives improve based on a decision you have been asked to make tonight. The proposed senior housing development on San Bruno Avenue received the permits from the Planning Commission without seeking or receiving any variances. It is compliant with all requirements, including parking, and it will offer low-income housing units for those in the most need. While our city's conversation about the future of Brisbane and other areas, while our city's conversation about the future of the Baylands and other areas is ongoing, we have an opportunity here and now to step forward in our commitment to be a part of the solution to our region's housing crisis, and to serve seniors, our cherished and respected elders who far too often are facing challenges around housing, loneliness, and accessing care. Those 16 seniors on whose behalf I speak to you tonight may be long-term residents, they may be people that some people in this room have grown up with, or they may be family members of city residents who want to bring their loved ones closer to them. All of them, however, will help ensure that Brisbane remains a lively, intergenerational community where all ages are nourished and respected. And so, as you thoughtfully consider your position, I humbly and respectfully thank you on behalf of the future residents of the project and their families for allowing this project to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Carter.
Good evening. This is a beautiful looking building. I think they've done a fantastic design when I look at it. It aesthetically looks very pleasing. I think it fits in well where it is. I know there's a small house next to it, but when I look at it, it's a pretty good looking thing they've done. There's a couple concerns I have. We need senior housing, definitely. We need affordable housing, definitely. I think most people I know agree with that. The parking that's been discussed about the 23 Club is one thing that concerns me. And if you've noticed, the Brisbane Inn is back open again, and they have a parking lot, and it's been used a lot. So it does concern me that when that does open up, there's going to be more traffic. There's going to be more parking for sure. Exiting, when they do have the 23 open again, first of all, them sharing a space with this space doesn't seem feasible to me. No one's going to want wondering drinking people coming out, the noise of the music coming out the back, so that doesn't make sense to me. That triangle space being shared, it doesn't really make sense when you think about it in a living capacity. Those seniors up there sleeping, guys coming out the back making noise, guys, gals drinking, the noise coming out. But I think there is a concern about exiting in case of a fire on the back of that building, that something should be created so in case of an emergency, when they do open the 23 Club, that they could just exit out of that and get out if it's possible. It's just a thought that I had when I'm thinking of that for safety. On the apartments themselves, There is some language on there that concerned me, and I know Terry picked it up on there where it talks about ADA. It doesn't say ADA compliant. And my concern is that you guys, as a group, and the city make sure that the elevator is ADA compliant, that the spaces are ADA compliant to get to the spaces, that the building is. By code, it has to be. Now, as far as the units themselves, there's going to be some issues because those bathrooms, when you look at them, when you're trying to get ADA compliant bathrooms, they aren't a size that's going to make that happen. I think we want our seniors to be able to age in place. So what they can do in the process of building is make a few things, and I don't think you're going to make every unit ADA compliant, but I see that all the bathrooms had tubs from this drawing here, and I don't know if that's going to be the final design. If they're going to do that, to me, they should be the tubs that have the doors in them, and then the doors close up, and it can still be a shower and tub unit like normal. But that's the big thing for seniors, is getting their feet up over and slipping and falling in the bathroom. So if they could work that into design, I just think it's a good idea when you're thinking of a construction purposes. The parking obviously is going to be a concern, and it's a concern in Brisbane in general. I think they've tried to do the best they could with it. I think with what we've heard about the senior housing and how it's being used right now, I think that kind of answers some of my concerns about that. Someone else is going to have a really good suggestion later. I'm not going to take her thunder on that. That could be very beneficial. My also thought was, what is the current cost of the senior housing that we have, that has the waiting list? I believe it's probably significantly lower than what this housing is going to be. So seniors are going to use it. It's going to get used, but I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison, really. Our senior housing is driven, by income also, and it's really affordable. So it's not necessarily the same comparison to me. We got my next sheet. See if I covered everything. As far as the worried about people having cars or not having cars, I think we can all agree that enforcing any kind of thing, saying you can't own a car is just going to drive someone to park on my street and walk down there. I mean, come on. We don't want our police to spend their time searching around for a senior who has a car and pretends he doesn't have a car, because I don't think it's a realistic thing that we can do. We have a hard enough time. You have... actually, Chief Macias and I were talking about, you have a family that has a couple people there. Their kids come home from college. Now 3 more cars got added. They're not doing anything wrong. They have now 5 people, and they had 2 before. So that's just part of our town, and it's something we have to shuffle around and live with. I try to be courteous. Most of the good neighbors in town, I respect where my neighbors park. I try to put my cars in the driveway whenever I can. When your visitors come over, they can park where they want. But I think we all know that some parking things are not going to be perfect, but I think they've done a good job with what they're trying to get into space-wise. And I looked really hard at this because I had some people tell me that they didn't like this project in general. And I was impressed by it. I was impressed by the articulation of it. It looks good. It looks like it meets with it. I know the small house next door, it's not good for them, but it meets the height criteria. So whenever we're meeting the criteria, I think we all have to fight for the fact that when someone says that bothers my view, well, look, if you have an empty lot next to you and some guy builds a house, you can't tell me now I don't have a view, because that's their lot and that's their right. So I think that's something to always remember in these cases. I think I've covered most of my points. So I think the housing is a great idea, with a few things that, as the city goes through the plans, that they're careful of as far as ADA restrictions, make sure that it meets all the general codes for getting into the building, getting up to the apartments, and then encourage them to do as much as they can to make the apartments really ready for seniors. The bathrooms especially. If they can put in a grab bar, put a grab bar in. If there can be a grab bar in the shower, put a grab bar in there. Make it so the doors open up. So if we're going to make this happen, let's do the best we can for them. And it sounds like the gentleman is doing it. To me, he sounds sincere in what he wants to do. And, that's my thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Michelle Salmon.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. As much as I love the way that things used to be, that's not how they're going to be in the future. I think this is a really well thought out and thoughtful project, and I'm in favor of it. And I agree with many of the things that Dan said about making sure that it is really accessible for seniors as they age in place. Not necessarily making every unit wheelchair accessible, no, but grab rails and showers and safety issues. But the real issue that this appeal is about is parking, and parking continues to be a sore spot in Brisbane no matter what we do. And I hadn't thought of this idea before I came, but watching the presentation and all the slides, it became really obvious to me that one way we could help, it won't alleviate it, but it would really help, especially in relation to this project and the one that's going to be built across the street, where we'll face the same issue, is to institute diagonal parking on one side of the street. And probably on the downhill side, because that's where you get the most benefit and it's the safest. The street is the same size as Visitation Avenue, and if we really are smart about it, we would be able to put diagonal parking on the east side of the street and really increase the parking capacity for that block. And that's my suggestion. And if you did put it on the west side of the street, I would suggest you move the fire hydrant to the front and create an actual extra 2 spaces there if you do diagonal parking, by not having the fire hydrant taking up a parking place. So I really think diagonal parking could help alleviate it. It's something the city could do. We could make the sidewalk on that side a little narrower just to make sure that we have plenty of access. It seems like it'd be more convenient on the uphill side, but it would be safer on the downhill side, where people pull in downhill just like they do on Visitation, because it's safer when they're backing out. And it also slows them down a little bit. I'm afraid if it's on the west side, the side that the building's on and the hardware store's on, when people first start up the street, they may not be as conscious as they are when they're coming down the street. I also, while we're speaking about it, I do think that we should not allow people to make a U-turn into a parking place over a double yellow line like they do on Visitation Avenue now. I think that is extremely dangerous, and I don't think that should be allowed. It wasn't allowed when I was growing up, and it's allowed now. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I'm suggesting diagonal parking, and people like to go phew into the parking spot, is really dangerous, and it should not be allowed in Brisbane at all. It is actually in the California Vehicle Code that it is not allowed to make a U-turn over a double yellow line in a business district. So thank you for hearing this. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to stay for the whole thing.
Thank you. Great suggestion. Okay. Mickey McGee.
Good evening. My name is Mickey McGee. I'm the only senior that I think is going to be talking tonight. You are?
I'm
okay.
qualified.
Okay. I do live at 8 Visitation Avenue.
64 and over.
Bring it over. Yeah, there you go.
I do live at 8 Visitation Avenue. This is the area we're talking about. I live in a senior housing. I live right across from the 23 Club. God help me. I'll need all the help I can get. I came here to help my friend Denise, just to be here for her. And I heard things that really upset me. The first one, I'll take off. I took a good hard look at the paperwork, and the timing of the notification on this for Denise was horrible. This has been before the city for 1 full year, and she had 1 week. That's the only notification she had to look at the situation, and I don't think that's quite right. If you have something that's going to impact the neighborhood, the people in the neighborhood should know about it as quickly as possible. Personal opinion. As far as the senior applications in all of these situations, I do live in that apartment house. I know a lot of the people who are applying for it. I know that most of them come from out of town. Quite a few do come from in town, but a whole lot of them want to move into Brisbane. And I don't blame them. I really don't. But you have to bear that in mind. Parking, where I live, I've got a street right behind my front door, right behind my back door, which I don't have, on my back windows. It's North San Francisco Avenue. And that is totally parked up every night. It's totally parked up by people from up on the hill. The number of parking places that are being used by the people in our operation is about 50%, and that's been mentioned here already. I really wonder how we're going to handle anything like the parking that used to hit the 23 Club. I've lived in Brisbane since 1982. Almost the entire time within rock throwing distance to the 23 Club, and I often wanted to throw rocks. Often. I live right across the street from it right now, and I'm afraid I'm going to be wanting to throw rocks again. That parking lot used to be full. Every night that they had a decent band, that parking lot used to be full. The one that they are now going to turn into a senior center. Where are those cars going to go? Where are you going to put them? Are you going to put a parking lot over in the Baylands? Why not? That's about the only thing you can do. There isn't any parking in that area that you're going to have that's going to be available to the 23 Club. You've just eliminated a good bit of it. The last one is, I heard the word noise. I heard the word music. Where I live is exactly across the street from the 23 Club's front door. I can look at the 23 Club front door from my front door. I have called the police department about as many as 6 times in the night about the noise coming out of the 23 Club on front door side. They know me well. They know my voice. And I had a friend who used to live on Mariposa Street. I think it's Mariposa Street, right behind the 23 Club. And at one point, when they had these meetings up at the other facility, he came down and showed pictures of him using mattresses to try to keep the noise down in his apartment or in his house. The 23 Club is not a place that I really appreciate. It was one thing when it was country music, but when it's the kind of stuff they're using now, I really want to shoot them. So, thank you for making this available to me and allowing me to talk. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick. Joel Diaz?
Good evening, Honorable City Council members. Joel Diaz. So I'm also an owner in interest of the property, and I just wanted to get up and try to address some of the questions that you guys had this evening. And trying to recall most of them. If I don't hit some of them, maybe you could please just remind me what the questions were. But in terms of the parking lot and its use in conjunction with the club, I think John or someone said the club's been kind of dormant for a while. And that's probably a pretty good word to explain it. A lot of times the parking lot was roped off or was chained off. At one point there were some mobile homes back there, just wasn't used. And, I ask you guys to maybe try to remember back driving down Visitation when the club was open and try to remember how many cars were actually parked on the street in front of the club. And it wasn't very many. And that's part of the reason why it kept going out of business and it was changing hands, is because they just don't do a lot of business. They do on the weekends if they have like a rockabilly show or something like that. Then we see like a real lot of people. Even then, they weren't using the parking lot a lot of the time. It was not being used. And those were pretty rare occasions, when they would have those big shows. Most of the time, it was pretty dead. And that's the problem with the 23 Club, is there's too much overhead. And so part of our strategy was to lower the overhead for the operator, to preserve the business, and to make it viable for an operator. And so I looked at the books. I know that their overhead was about $10,000 a month. And if they were lucky, they would break even and take in about $10,000 a month. But most of the time, they were actually losing money. And so it was a slow bleed, and then eventually they would go out. And you guys probably recollect kind of what that looked like with the different ownership. It was a very painful situation, a lot of wishful thinking. And what it does is it creates a great deal of financial pressure on the operator. It makes it so they lose their creativity. They don't have a chance to build up clientele. They start doing things that aren't super attractive. And we remember some of those things that were happening. And so what our plan was to remove the cafe. The utilities in the cafe are really dilapidated. The utility bill was $4,000 to $5,000 a month, if you can believe that. It was shocking. In its place, we would like to put an outdoor seating area with like a fire pit, some benches. The fire pit's kind of just an option, but you kind of get an idea of people sitting around. There would be double doors that go into the side of the 23 Club, and this would be create a setback. And there'd be maybe about 20 by 25 foot this outdoor seating area, and then set back 25 feet would be a new commercial building. And this commercial building was intended to be what we call a flex space. And it's a space that you can do like art or yoga, but it could be all sorts of other things. And that flex space is to be used by the seniors and the senior community, the seniors at the corner at the senior center and the new seniors. And that flex space is what was intended to be connected to the open space behind the 23 Club that's part of this project. Not the bar, not the crowd from the bar to come in and hang out in that space, but the flex space itself opens up to that. So the yoga can come out into the garden area, the art can come out there. It's also something that the community could use, the park and rec could possibly use it. There could be some sort of children's activities there too. It'd be, a scheduling thing we'd have to work out. And the idea was it was going to be an asset for the community. And it would create space for people in the club to go outside. So the club actually still maintains quite a bit of space, usable space. We were going to take the kitchen and build a new kitchen inside the club with a walk-up window to this outdoor seating area. I wish I had the plan so I could show you. We presented them at our workshop, our voluntary workshop that we're at. And the idea was this is a co-op kitchen, also to lower the overhead of the operator, so that somebody could rent it out. Somebody just wants to do lunch, somebody just wants to do breakfast, or maybe they just want to do Friday dinner, or maybe we want to rent it out and have a party there. This little co-op kitchen is available. And then the operator isn't burdened by having to run that kitchen all the time. They can just focus on the bar business. And the idea is the crowds get much smaller, yet it sustains the business. And what we wanted to do was upgrade the bathrooms, upgrade the stage, make it more of a utilitarian stage, more versatile, so it could maybe for theatrical purposes, poetry night. This is a small venue for small crowds, and we need to somehow figure out how to attract small crowds to keep it going. You get lucky with the rockabilly thing, but they don't do it every weekend. It's once every few months or something, twice a year. So this was the strategy about that. The soundproofing was going to take place in conjunction with that, because we'd be demoing the cafe. We were going to completely baffle the side of the building and part of the roof and the rear of the 23 Club. So that would create this real big sound barrier. Now, our architect, Jim, was not at the workshop. I think he was actually getting married. I think you were. Yeah. And so he wasn't there to participate in that part of it. So that's kind of why he probably didn't recollect that. But we were going to soundproof it and soundproof the front while we're doing this extensive remodel. I think, so that was how the back was going to work. There would have to be an emergency exit, but that would be one of those doors that says you can't go through or the alarm goes off kind of thing. You know, you have to meet the fire code kind of thing. The shops were intended to, we have a lot of artists in town and a lot of artisans, people that make things. And so the idea was, let's lower the overhead because we have a lot of vacancies, these commercial spaces that are vacant. They're too expensive. And people would like to display their wares and their goods and their art. So what we thought was, here's a way to create connectivity with the street and the building, yet keep the overhead of the space very low. And local artists could display their goods and sell their things or provide their services. And we feel like it's probably going to be something that we have to subsidize, but that it's going to be really nice. And that maybe we could do like a rotational thing where people from the community can rotate in for a year or 6 months or whatever, whatever it works out to be. And what ties with that is how do we manage all that? So what we have is a professional management team. And we create an operational plan, how all this is going to work. The commercial spaces, the senior housing, the parking spaces, all of this stuff falls under that operational plan. There's a lot of senior operation plans that are in place, and we're basically just going to copy them, not really going to reinvent anything. Along with that, there'll be reports to the city annually about the income restricted units, the success of the project, statistics. Within a certain degree, we can share some of that information. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this was because by the year 2035, they're predicting the senior population to triple. They're calling it the silver tsunami. And it's going to be the largest age group that there is. And so this is a tremendous need, and it's a tremendous service. And that age group starts at 62. It's not just the quintessential senior citizen that we think of that's sort of walks with a cane. But these are all just, 60s and 70-year-old people are actually very physically healthy, some of them, very fit. And so we would be marketing to all ages above 62. It's not an assisted living type facility. It's for people that are independent. We intend the people to be walking around the community. Certainly we can provide some wheelchair access spaces, but the idea is to have seniors with walkability, a good walkability score for the neighborhood, so they can patronize businesses, so they can be free, so they don't have to drive. And this is something that a lot of seniors like to do, be able to walk places and not have to worry about driving and the stress of seeing. And so, with seeing, this ADA is Americans with Disabilities Act. Disabilities, lots of disabilities. They can't see, they can't hear so well, and there's many disabilities. And so there's, the state code on that, on the ADA requirements. And so that's what we would adhere to, is what the code requires us to do. Certainly a part of that is supplying wheelchair units. And we're just going to adhere to that. You're going to see wide doors, bars, all those things are pretty standardized. But the actual wheelchair units would be limited to what's required by the code. And if it weren't, from a practical sense, it would preclude us from being able to do it, because say if all the units were wheelchair, they look totally different. And there's no cabinets. Counters are very low. The upper cabinets are very low. There's no tile. They're not really as nice, right? We would immediately eliminate 90% of our market. And that would make it so we couldn't do that. And also then we wouldn't really have that life where the people are walking around patronizing and stuff. And so that's kind of what we're going for. And when we have this silver tsunami and we have triple the population, we're going to have a lot of people that want to come and be there. It's a voluntary facility. It's for independent people. We want it to work with the existing senior housing, with the new flex space. And actually part of my goal is, I'm pretty excited about this, is to do another senior project here in town. And for me, it's very exciting. And to do something like this that can make a big change, and I wouldn't miss it. And so this is something that I'm focusing on. Really excited about it. I'm hoping I answered most of the questions. If you have any others, I'd be happy to address them.
I did have one question. So I'm glad that you gave us an update on the 23 Club and plans and things that you want to do. What's the time frame?
So next year is what we'd like to do. And we're currently considering a tenant for that space. And we're trying to move very quickly on that. That's the goal.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, we have one more slip. It's a little hard to read. Sophia Alamond.
Element.
Alamond.
I'm not good at public speaking, so if I make a fool out of myself, that's it. I live in that area, and I'm going to tell you how bad the parking really is. It's a nightmare. There's nowhere to park. You got 4 big apartment buildings, and you have like many families that live in some of the apartment buildings. And I watch at night where cars just drive around Monterey and Mariposa up and down all night trying to find spots. There is none. And there's a lot of families that rent out rooms and houses, and everywhere there's just so many people in those streets. There's nowhere. And again, the 23 Club parking lot, how are you going to open the 23 Club when you have no parking? There's no parking. There is none. I mean, the apartment house across the street has no parking, and it has 12 units. It was built in the old days when you didn't need one. And I just think there's just so many people now in that one area that it's a nightmare. It's just, and then you want to build where the 2 oldest people in Brisbane live. This is like the old part of Brisbane, and one's 94, and that's my father. He's going to be 95. And the neighbor that lives next door, she's 97. Her kids wanted to put her in her home so she didn't have to endure this. And she's healthier than I am. I'm just thinking, here you have the oldest people in Brisbane. They walked the Golden Gate Bridge the day it opened. That was over 80 years ago. And this might be the end of their lives, too, because they have to listen to that noise. I don't know. I'm just really... You know, you got to care for your old people in Brisbane. These are the old timers that lived here forever. My father was born in the apartment house, that 12 unit. That was my grandmother and grandfather's apartment. They sold it years ago, and my uncle got sick, and he took care of it, so they sold it. And now, I don't know, I don't want to see them die because of this.
Thank you. Okay. I have no more slips. Barbara Ebel.
Hi, I just had one of those little lightning bolts in the head. If the now there's plenty of parking in the existing senior space. There's a lot of vacancy there, actually. And perhaps with the demographic that's moving into this new senior space, it might be a little younger, on the younger end of senior, and a little more driving. And I don't know what the rules are, but I'm wondering if there could be some kind of cooperative agreement between the two senior housing units, where if it turns out there's not enough parking, that they could go and park in the other senior development. They could rent a certain number of those spaces that are not being used, just to help things, to alleviate the problems. And it might be the revenue might go to the Sunrise Room or something to fund activities or something. Just a thought. Thanks.
Do we have any information on whether there's any unused parking spots at the senior center? Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Again, I'm Mickey McGee.
Sorry, Mickey, you have to start over.
Because our
Got to do the
people
whole
at home
thing.
can't hear it.
I am Mickey McGee. I live at 8 Visitation in Brisbane Senior Center. I've been living there for 18 years, since it opened. The parking is about 60% or maybe 70% at the most. We have one person with several cars. He parks most of them on the street because he only has one spot. Otherwise, most of the people just don't have cars. They've gotten rid of them. I would hate to think of what Judy would say to that last proposal. Judy Proconi is the person who operates our business, our building, and I don't think she would like having other people from other places come in because she has no control on that at that point. And I think that would be a big issue.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Danny Ames?
Would it be possible to have Randy get the prices or estimates to go with diagonal parking and kill two birds with one stone? Also help alleviate the congestion, and not just one block, but maybe 2 blocks or even 3 blocks, and get a pricing from Randy, and what that would really mean, and what could we do that? I mean, with all seriousness, and investigate that. Also, maybe Dave and Joel can also pledge that you would not allow Airbnb activity in the property. Would you pledge that? Yes? Good. Okay. Great. Okay. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Bonnie Boswell?
Bonnie Boswell, San Diego Court. Just a note, this is such an ideal location. Where else are you going to find a builder with a vacant lot willing to build senior housing in such an ideal location, close to the parks, close to the senior citizen center, close to the library, close to the community center? It's the perfect location for senior housing.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to speak who hasn't yet spoken? Seeing no hands, come on back up.
I've talked a lot, obviously. Hang on. I've talked a lot, obviously, but I just want to mention, we've already talked about this project a lot, and Joel did a great job following everything up. So I just want to mention some idea that came up in the other hearing that really is not directly at our project per se, and I just don't know why it's not discussed more, but I think there's, well, the Teen Center's an example next door, but I think there's land in this area where you could think about a central garage for people to use as public parking. And I don't know why that's not discussed, because other towns have done that. When they want people to come to the town to enjoy it, they have a public structure somewhere for parking. And I think that would alleviate a lot of concerns about all the other developments that go up. You still have the minimum requirements to meet in the houses or the facilities like ours. And so there needs to be discussion about finding a space where there's a public garage. You get income from that as well. People would be willing to put, change in their meters, or whatever, however you do it. I think that's something that should be considered.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing no hands. Is there a motion?
Motion to close public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing's closed. Council discussion?
So, I'll start off, and I don't know how feasible diagonal parking would be, or if it would be a net gain or a loss, depending on how the existing driveways and entrance and egress would be. And I think that would be interesting to know, and I assume that staff wouldn't really have and they might have an idea of if that would add parking and or traffic issues. Is that something staff could address at all?
I think we really have to spend some time with the city engineer. He'd have to look at, as you say, the driveway openings, the distances. So I wouldn't want to, make a off the cuff sort of remark on that. But if there's something the council wants to direct the city engineer to, study and report back, certainly your prerogative.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a quick study would be fine. On Burlingame Avenue, they had diagonal parking, then they went to the parallel parking, and I think they lost like 5 parking spots. And so hard to say, is it a good thing or not? But I think Randy could probably figure it out pretty darn quick.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the study. I think it's a really
And
interesting
would changing the way the city stripes the street change this project, the application process where we would have to postpone it to get that information, or is that something that could be decided when a building permit was issued?
Well, I think as we've discussed, the project meets the city parking code. So if you want to look at, like, you can authorize parking changes anywhere on public right-of-way, independent of a decision on this project.
Okay.
Right, and the cost of going with diagonal parking would just be the cost of restriping the road, or maybe the cost of moving a hydrant. But I'm just wondering if that's a cost that we would be able to wrap into this project,
I don't think we should.
or whether it's minimal and we do that independent.
That's to be on our dime.
Really, Mayor, I think you want to keep your public parking and your street management separate from
Okay.
the application.
Okay.
And we've looked at this issue on visitation before too, so I'll have Randy take a quick look and get you some information.
Okay. My other comment is, I know that, and I'm not against this project, but the comparison to the waiting list for the subsidized housing is completely different than the waiting list or the potential customer base for a project that has, 2 units or 3 units as subsidized, or not subsidized, but designated low mod. That's only out of the waiting list of 50 or 100, whether it may be, 3 people for the list that might come off it. And it wouldn't necessarily have the same waiting list that is on the current senior housing, which is subsidized housing that the city built and no profit was involved. So they can afford to rent it at a much lower rate than any housing that's other than the designated units would be. So while senior housing is really necessary, I don't think we can really say it's going to take 16 people off of the list that are waiting for our current low-income housing. It might take 3 off the list, but it's not the panacea for our entire community, certainly.
It helps, though.
Well, it helps. Oh, yeah. Every 3 people is 3 people less. And I just wanted to bring that up. I would like, since this is designated to be rental units, I would like to see that some of them are handicapped accessible, or certainly that they're ADA and have showers and, walk-in showers perhaps instead of bathtubs, or however the developer can manage it to make them as senior friendly as possible. And I don't know how we would write that in to any conditions. The other thing I would really like to see is, they talk about it having deco inspiration. I'd like to see some actual architectural features that we see that have a little more deco inspiration. It's not as square as it could be, but it's pretty square, and
It's not as deco as it could be.
And it's not as deco as it could be. It's got a lot of really harsh corners, and it's very square, and part of that street is very square.
Yeah,
And so in a way it's fitting in, and I'm sure that the Planning Commission looked at as much of the features as far as stucco and texture and paint that they could, but it'd be really cool if it did have some of the scroll work and the offset stucco type things that really showed. And maybe I'm just not seeing them in the artist renderings and not envisioning them what they could look like. But those would be my comments on that. And then I wonder why, because I wasn't involved in the original visioning process, that the 23 Club was taken out of the mix. I'm wondering if we could get an idea of why the two properties were separated, so that they can't be sort of intertwined from the beginning instead of doing it somewhat after the fact as a separate property. And maybe the applicant or Mr. Diaz, with your approval, I think I'd like to hear the answer to that.
So the reason is mainly financial, that the properties would have to be merged together. And we're actually considering a tenant right now and potentially conveying that property. And we wouldn't be able to do that necessarily if they were tied together. And we wanted them to be independent so that we could make decisions. And they wouldn't, if they were combined, we wouldn't be able to do that. And initially we thought we were going to, but then we determined that we would not be doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one question to clarify. When you said conveying the property, you mean considering selling it or
Yes,
renting it?
yes, yeah.
Okay. So it wouldn't be a tenant, it would be a purchaser.
The structure of that would depend, and that's part of what I'm talking about. And a lot of it's confidential, so I can't explain that to you because it's business. But there's potential for that, and we couldn't have the projects combined. Otherwise, we'd sort of be handcuffed, and we wouldn't be able to do any of these things.
Okay, thank you.
So to follow up that with staff, because this is a standalone project, not including the 23 Club, is it possible that the 23 Club site would be able to also have this density with the amount of storefront and residential added to that? Or because it's on the main street, would it have a different designation?
No, they're both zoned the same, so the same zoning, which is housing by conditional use permit as part of a mixed-use development, if that's what they wanted to do, or if they wanted to do just an alteration to the commercial building, that would probably be something that was done just through a design permit, again, through the Planning Commission. So it depends what the final project would be. But the zoning on the San Bruno piece and the visitation piece are the same.
So there's no, does the historic designation of the 23 Club have any difference, make any difference on what can be done there, or if it needs to go through, would need to go through additional planning review?
That would be reflected in the CEQA work for whatever project comes that altered that facility. That would be addressed as part of the CEQA and environmental impact analysis.
Okay, but we don't know if that would really protect that property or not from having a similar kind of project on it.
The designation, one of the activities that would occur for any sort of alteration of that 23 Club site would be a formal survey as to its eligibility and its historic significance. And usually as part of that, if it does have historic significance, there are then standards that are adopted through the federal government for how you make alterations or sympathetic or compatible alterations or modifications or additions that are subject to, again, some fairly rigorous review procedures through the city as well.
So as a question, and forgive me for this, I know we've called it the Historic 23 Club, but does it have official designation?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I'm happy to go next.
Okay, go ahead.
So I spent this whole entire meeting just writing down thoughts, and they're like all over my paper. So I'm going to do a really good job of trying to stay by topic, but I'm just forewarning you, it might be a little scattered because my notes are a little scattered. So first off, I want to say that I'm in agreement that there is a very strong need for senior housing. That was something that I am still very passionate about, but it's something that I, made a commitment when I was running for city council that seniors would be a very big priority to me. And I think it's extremely important to encourage ways for seniors to age in place. And we really need to take care of our aging population and keep them in mind. So for that reason, I am in support of this project, but I do have a lot of concerns as well, which I'll go over. I did spend a lot of time really reviewing this project, many hours, because I did receive personally a significant amount of people who came to me with concerns. Although, through my council email, I did receive a lot of letters in support, but just from people coming and talking to me individually who I think maybe are a little bit concerned about speaking out against, a senior development, because we all want places for our seniors. So I think it's kind of hard to come out publicly and maybe raise concerns. So a lot of people came to me privately, and so I did spend a lot of time looking at this. And I do think that this will contribute a significant amount of parking issues to the neighborhood. I don't see a way around that. I think there's some conflict here because you say it's for 62 and older, therefore, they're able to walk, which I understand. But also typically people who are 62 and older, 60s, early 70s, even maybe late 70s, they tend to still drive. So I think that those thoughts are kind of in conflict with each other. And I know from having 3 grandparents, one is about to turn 90 and the rest are in their late 80s, they take a lot of pride in still being able to drive. And the thought of losing their car is like losing their independence. And I don't really think that they have a capacity to really walk many places. So I think we kind of need to think about those points when we talk about really what is going to happen at this development with the people who come in and move here. I think that diagonal parking is a great idea, that we should look at that. I know that there are concerns over the 23 Club and parking associated with that. In this scenario, though, it's really important to apply what you have on the books. And so because of that, what we have on the books really states that, that because that business is on visitation, typically businesses on visitation don't really have to take into consideration parking. That was my understanding from what I read in my packet, as well as what I've talked with staff. And so it would be unfair to apply a standard to one business that doesn't apply to all of the other businesses. There is an element you have to consider about being fair and applying the law fairly to everybody, and you would want it if it were you. So there are some struggles there for me because I understand that that parking is a problem, and I think this will contribute. But at the same time, you have to look at something fairly. You have to apply what codes and what zoning is in effect. So I would potentially, like to see if the management company can inquire about how many vehicles that somebody owns when they are looking to rent. I think together as a community, we want to try and make this development work, but we also want to be sensitive to potential parking issues that it could arise. And I really think that we all need to work together. There's no argument about whether senior housing is good or not. I think we can all agree on that. But the significant concerns are around parking, and I think there are some creative ways we maybe can all work together without completely saying no to the project, which I don't think is a viable solution. You have to go with the codes that you have. You have to apply those fairly. So, and we also can't necessarily impose, more parking than what we already have on our books. And I think that speaks to a bigger discussion. I think some of our zoning and the way that our codes are written maybe don't serve us the way that they should, but that's not really the discussion that we're having right now. But I think it's something that is worth looking at. The next thing that I'm really concerned about that really no one has brought up whatsoever, but it's kind of the first thing being a business major when I was in college and growing up with my parents having a business on Visitation and having a small business myself, I'm very concerned about the commercial units in this building. I know that housing is a conditional use. It has to be a part of mixed use, and so commercial has to come into play. I don't see these commercial units hosting very successful retail businesses. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. I mean, San Bruno is not a street in which we have lively commercial businesses. It hasn't been for a very long time. You can see, we got the teen center, nothing's going on there. We have next to the hardware store, there's another little storefront, nothing's going on there. One San Bruno, nothing's going on there. And that's an even bigger space, which is more viable for a bigger business. It attracts the potential for a lot of other businesses. And I receive significant complaints from people, and this is something that bothers me, is that you want your downtown to feel lively, and you don't want to have all of these vacant units. Even at the Village, we have gone through many periods with vacant units. And so I think it makes more sense. I know we have to make sure that there's a commercial component to allow for the housing because it's a conditional use, but I think maybe taking out one of those commercial spaces and adding another parking would help everybody and wouldn't contribute to a parking problem. But I can't really name very many successful retail businesses in town, seriously retail. Lloyd's is a great example of a great retail business, but we've seen so many retail businesses come in, like the Gallery, and many others that have found it hard to survive. And Joel even talked about that when he was talking about the 23 Club. It's like a slow and painful process that you see, and when they come in, they're so excited, you want to support them, but you just see it going downhill almost immediately. And I think with that kiosk style, we might have to keep that, but all of the suggested uses, a flower shop, a hat shop, a ceramic store, those are all very niche sorts of businesses. I don't see those doing well in Brisbane. I wish they would. I want businesses like that. I think that that model is totally acceptable for the Ferry building, because imagine the amount of traffic you have and people that are walking and shopping. That's just not really the vibe that I see on that street. And I think that it's a mistake. I don't want to see any more commercial spaces that are not being utilized. It's like, so many people talk about one San Bruno, and it's like, I don't want to contribute to the problem. I want to figure out ways that we can, target parking in a creative way. So I'm just looking over my notes here to make sure. With respect to size, it seems like it's the standard size for a multi-unit building. There are plenty of multi-unit buildings that are in the area that are of a compatible size. The tree next to the building looks taller than the building, which would kind of, I think, block it a little bit from view, which might be nice. I have doubts that you would actually be able to see the building from Visitation with the way that it's set back. I'm not totally convinced that when you're walking down Visitation, you're actually going to be able to see it behind the 23 Club. But we haven't discussed that. But I don't really see it imposing on any sort of views. So I'd like to see the council maybe take a closer look at the commercial and try and find some creative ways to look at parking as well. Sorry to ramble on there, but I just had to get it all out.
That was great. Okay. Clark?
No, Cliff.
All right. And I really like the project. I think it's a great example of what can be done with a small space and provide housing for our community that's really needed. In regards to the design, I think it's okay. It's not something that really calls out as a really landmark type of design, because it's something that has been duplicated, in other places. But one of the things that we're going to be discussing on Monday, is the Parkside Precise Plan, and how we have decided this is how buildings are going to look in this area, and so it's. But I think what this project does, and having this meeting tonight, you can really sense from the community that it does want to see some housing in the downtown, and if it achieves a certain need. And of course this one is for seniors. The site next door, potentially could be for teachers. That's something that we've talked about, and who knows, maybe there might be some other senior housing opportunities in Parkside. I thought Dan Carter brought up some really good suggestions. I think we need to have that access, emergency access out the backside. Not, I think it's just emergency access for that common space. That really should just be for this complex. I talked about the tub doors for the tubs. That might be something that excuse me, that might work for the developer, and if they can incorporate that, I think that would be good. I don't want to be so micromanaging though of their units. They need to make a profit. There has to be that incentive for them, and I don't want to take away from their vision. I think what they've put forth is something that is really taking in the community as well as their business interests, and really I think that's a really good partnership. I think that's how it should be. The parking for the 23 Club. Tomorrow I got to fly it out to Salt Lake City, and I'll be taking Uber and Lyft. When people go out now, they don't want to drink and drive, so a lot of them take Uber and Lyft. And I think if anyone in town wants to go to 23 Club, chances are they'll probably walk. And anyone from outside our area is going to go to the 23 Club, they'll probably take Uber, have a fun time at the 23 Club, make that little thing on their app, and someone will pick them up and they'll leave. So so I don't see that being a problem. Though one of the things though that we have talked about is that I'd like to see some additional soundproofing for the wall that faces the 23 Club from your buildings. Yes, we got to put in the proper noise insulation in the 23 Club, but if we can provide some additional for those units, I think that would be great. Then you're doubling it up. One of the things you brought up, Lori, was having an electric charge station. One of the things that is happening now are autonomous vehicles, and there'll be a point when seniors, hey, I don't need to drive because the car's driving, right? And so if and I don't know what the feasibility of this is, but I'm going to put it out there, and maybe you could work with staff. Is have a shared parking spot, that has that electric charge station that could eventually, when autonomous vehicles become more of a regular thing, maybe implementing that. I like that idea, the shared parking with the senior center, and not that would be a condition of approval, but I think that would be good to try and collaborate with the senior center. And you mentioned that green wall thing, so I'll leave that for you, Lori. I have a question for staff, though. What was the cost to appeal this? $362. Now I would not have appealed this because there wasn't a good reason for me to appeal it. But I've said it a couple times tonight that I'm really fortunate that it was appealed, because I think it was a discussion that we needed to have about housing and affordable housing in our downtown area. And if council is okay with this, I would like to waive that amount that she paid, and if we can reimburse her the $362, is it? Right? I'd like to reimburse her for the $362.
I agree with that.
I agree too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I asked for the documentation and didn't get it.
She seems to agree, so.
good idea.
There's nothing about, that's what I wanted to see was the fees and who had approved it, and it's not on there.
All right.
That's
There
it?
you go.
Okay. Clark. Okay.
All right, I'm going to talk around it before I get to the project itself. So, something that Dan Carter brought up in regards to the existing senior housing where you live at, Mickey. Just for some historical reference, that used to be the Tower Club, and there was parking in the rear. The City of Brisbane bought that through the redevelopment agency, and then we developed a senior housing plan, which we funded that with low and moderate income housing funds that we got from the 20% tax set aside from the redevelopment agency. The city owns it, but we don't manage it. So a lot of people always ask, what do I need to do to get it? I don't know. You got to talk to the bridge who manages the project. And it's based on sliding scale of how much people earn. So the big difference is these folks, I think, paid a pretty high price for the property, and so they're developing it themselves. So that's a big difference there, because I think a number of years ago this came before the city if we wanted to purchase that site, and I think Cliff, you and I wanted to go forward with it, but it was overruled at that time. So let me go back even further, back to the 70s, okay, when you had the zigzag. Okay, you had the Tower, you had a little bit of parking, you had the 23 Club, maybe at the absolute max was 20 cars, and generally not, because people park goofy. Then you go from Tower to the 23 Club to the Brisbane Inn, which had parking. Now Brisbane Inn's open. But then across the street, zigzag back across the street to where the Borough is now. Used to be a bar that was heavily frequented, and there is absolutely no parking except on-street parking, the Brisbane Inn parking, whatever there was in 23. So on Friday and Saturday nights, it was packed. And Sophie, I know you remember that because, yeah. And Michelle's no longer here, and so I know she does, and a few other folks. But now we no longer have the Tower, no longer have Quicksilver. Those are gone, right? And we've got senior housing in place of the Tower. Got a business that closes at 4:30 in the afternoon in place of the Quicksilver. Brisbane Inn just opened. They still have the same parking that they have. And then the 23 Club, which is still closed. Sophie and Denise, where you live is probably the most impacted part of Brisbane on parking. I mean, you got a 300-foot strip there that, there's multiple car owners, that park there. And Tuesday nights is probably the absolute worst, is because when we do the street cleaning on Wednesday morning, everybody goes and parks to the side street, and that just exacerbates the problem. But parking is an issue everywhere in Brisbane. And every once in a while we discuss this and come back to it and say, how are we going to fix this? And so it's going to be an ongoing issue. And but I'll come to the project. I support this project. I know folks who've grown up here in Brisbane. Close to 80 years old now. There was one guy who sold his house because it was too big for him to manage. I go, man, what did you do that for? I go, why didn't you rent it out? He goes, well, I figured to sell it because I'd never move back in it. Well, now he doesn't have no place to live in Brisbane. He wants to get back in Brisbane, and so he's one of those guys on the list, for the senior housing, and he can't live here. And one of our former mayors, Paul Gorky, he moved out in Brisbane. He wanted, when that senior housing opened, he wanted to get in there, and he was so upset because, God, I was a former mayor. I should have some kind of priority. Well, that's not the way it works. We don't manage it, Bridge Housing does. So, there's and another guy who did the same thing, sold his house, and so there is definitely a need for people, who live here. So, I support the project. I think it's got some good attributes. Biggest thing is I understand about the parking, and that potentially, we might have some issues there, and issues that we're going to have to figure out and how we can mitigate. But this falls within our laws, and our laws are our laws. And if we don't want to follow our laws because of one project, then, we can get ourselves into trouble because of that. And that's why we have a city attorney to try and keep us out of doing those things. So, in this case, I'm going to support the project. With regards to the commercial spaces, when we're talking about retail, and I own a retail store and I own a restaurant, and it's in Daly City, and the city of Daly City eliminated 4 beautiful parking spots, 2 right in front of my business, and it's a takeout, so it's constantly moving like this, and it created a real problem, and I told him, and you guys in your infinite wisdom, I go, you got these businesses going here, and I go, it's total Screwsville, so you have to really kind of think these things through and balance them out. But a 250 square foot business or a site and a 205 or 15 square foot site, maybe retail will work, I don't know. But I know of 3 businesses currently on visitation. One is First American Printing. That took over the old laundromat, which created a lot of traffic. 0 traffic, 1 car, the owner. And most of his stuff, his orders are done via computer. Right next to him is a CPA. 1 car at a time, if that. Lets people walk there. So that type of business could, support certainly an accounting business. Up the street where the former Hilltop Market was, the former business India Rose. She didn't have any cars there. They had all kinds of parking spots, and so, there's different businesses, different business models, and so I would look at, trying to make everything fit all, be all, I think that we should look at how we do it. I think somebody made the suggestion of a electric cart or a car or one of those rental car type things. That could be one of the spaces. I don't know how that would work. But something along those lines. But parking is an issue, certainly. I'm going to support the project as is with, some of the suggestions that were made with, more safety concerns and stuff like that. The ADA requirements. But also I think, our Complete Streets Safety Committee, we ought to really look at the 3 churches we have in town, the recently opened Brisbane Inn, and talk to the churches and the Brisbane Inn and see if we can get some nighttime parking or some parking to where we actually take cars off the street, because those businesses aren't used during the night, especially during Tuesdays, as long as we can kind of come up with some formidable regulations. I know we haven't really done that, and we're all one community, and I think it's a worthwhile effort to kind of start focusing some of our efforts there. That's a separate issue, but as far as the project goes, I'm going to support it. And I think there is a great need. And I'm glad. I mean, I am the only senior up here. Sorry, Terry. Vicky, I made it. Sophie, you're about a year away. Sorry.
I'm a couple years away
Yeah,
still.
but there's a waiting list.
I said I'm still a couple years away.
Yeah, you're a couple years away, but you're not there. But but I am a senior, and and I think about stuff like that too. It's like getting older, and of course, you're raising my grandkids and stuff like that. But hopefully, they don't want to hang out with us the whole time. It's like we can kind of do something different, or have a little flat, or something. And I think about stuff like that. That Brisbane is a place where people want to live, and a project like this can really add, I think, some good to it. And Sophie made some comments, man. It kind of hits me here, about some of the elderly people that that it do damage, and hopefully, that the folks that are doing the project can help, mitigate that and do some things to kind of look at, to really watch out, So anyway, that's mine.
Okay, great. Well, I'm hearing the support of all my colleagues, and I have to agree, I'm in support of the project. But much like Madison, I see the parking and the noise as concerns that I think we'll have to figure out some creative ways to deal with them. And I think not only does this support the need of providing housing to allow the seniors to age in place, which is the motto of the Brisbane Village Helping Hands program, but it also will open up houses. And I think Barbara Ebel made this point at the Planning Commission meeting that for every senior that owns a larger, maybe less accessible home with stairs in other parts of Brisbane, for each of those residents that then are able to move to a facility like this, then it opens up that home for potentially another young family to move into town. So it creates this domino effect. And I think that would be wonderful to be able to have a place for more seniors to be able to age in place and to stay in town, because we have so many stairs in our town. And I know when we moved homes, we moved from Sierra Point up to the Ridge, and we had one of those uphill homes where we had to climb like 2 flights of stairs to get to our front door. And we were thinking about our aging parents coming to visit us, and we wanted a place where they could easily get in and without the stairs. And I know there's so many residents, so many seniors in town that battle those stairs day in and day out, and I don't know how they do it. But I think having an option like this for them would just be such an optimal choice. And I agree that this meets the parking requirements, so I think we're obligated to accept it. It'll help satisfy our housing obligations under RENA and the housing element. And I hope that we can also consider some additional conditions of approval. The ones that I talked about were the electric vehicle. We might need staff to flesh this out with the applicant, to figure out where that parking spot would be and whether it would be like a neighborhood electric vehicle that gets provided, or if it's just a spot that's provided in one of the on-site parking spots or on perhaps the street. The second thing was the more aesthetics or landscaping for that wall on the south side of Mariposa. I also really like the idea of maybe having one of those walls on the north or south side be potentially covered with a mural. That would help provide some aesthetics. And then as for the ADA accessibility, I understand what the applicant's saying about marketability, and you can't have every unit be wheelchair accessible. But I really like Dan Carter's suggestions about the bathrooms. My parents, right now they're 75 and they're in the last year like falling and breaking bones. And, it's about getting in and out of places. And they're actually going to be renting a place in the area in San Mateo. And they were able to request one of those grab bars, and I think it might even be required by law that a property owner install that if it's requested. So I hope that we could have grab bars and accessible showers for all of the units, especially on request. And the diagonal parking, I really like that idea that Michelle Salmon suggested, because that's how it is on Visitation, and it seems to work out really well. It's similarly a large, wide street. So I'd be in support of having staff do a study to figure out what side of the street to put it on and what that would look like. And the 23 Club, so I know that's the next phase. That's a separate project, and I know that there's a lot of people in town who historically they remember the great heydays of the 23 Club. And it was great in its day, but it also makes me wonder about whether we really need to reconsider what our current needs are as a city, and what the best use is of that property. Whether if we put back the 23 Club, it's going to come with the noise, it's going to come with the parking issues. I think it would be helpful for us to consider whether it might be better to have another housing project on that site, and somehow figure out how to pay homage to what the 23 Club was, but at the same time recognize what our current needs are in Brisbane, and housing is a big one, and especially for seniors. For the commercial side, I really like Madison's suggestions of really looking at the viability of a retail space. I'm concerned about that too, because there's no retail on San Bruno Avenue.
Virtually
if we took away one retail, then we'd have one, and then it's like standing on its own, which I don't know if that's better, because then with two you could have some synergy. But one idea I have is, and I mentioned this also for the one San Bruno site, that I would love to see a place for people using the community park to be able to get like a smoothie or a yogurt, or some sort of soda fountain or smoothie yogurt shop, like some walk-up cafe that could provide some foot traffic, and the seniors could use it. And I think I see some like small food sales as being more beneficial and more widely used in the community than like a hat shop or ceramics or something like that. So
But
I think that something.
Is it equipped to be able to? Is there like plumbing? Is that how it's designed to be able to host a business like that? Sorry to cut you off, Lori. I think it's really important though to get that addressed.
I don't think it certainly wasn't plumbed for a kitchen. Certainly that wasn't the design. Normally that's left up to the discretion of the property owner how they want to furnish a commercial space, whether it's office, retail, restaurant, food.
Okay. Well, the applicant can look at how they are setting up the utilities, but I think, in my opinion, there's a greater need for that type of use than retail.
If I may, Joel and Dave, they're entrepreneurs, right? They're risk takers, just like your parents are, and they decided to have Madhouse. I mean, it's on their dime. They feel like they can do something with it. I say, hey, go for it.
I don't know that they're necessarily opening a business, though. They mentioned renting it out to somebody, and we have had 50% of small businesses close in their first year. I worked with small businesses, and I still do, solely working on helping them keep their doors open. And it's a struggle, and Brisbane is a prime example of that struggle. We aren't a Burlingame, and we don't want to be necessarily, but it makes it hard to have a retail business in town, and I don't think there's any denying that. And I can't point to many really successful examples. And so, but I can point to a lot of unsuccessful examples and a lot of vacant spaces. And one thing that I'm sure you hear when you're walking the campaign trail, and it's something I heard, was I would like a vibrant downtown. And I don't think vacant units contribute to a vibrant downtown. I think this building would. This building would add to community, it would add to a vibrant downtown, but I don't want it to also add to another problem that we have. And I think we might have to keep one of the commercial units because that's necessary for housing to be there, which I think is a flaw in the way that our zoning is created for that particular street. And I know, I mean, if I see those units vacant, like, I'm going to be talking about this for a long. You're going to hear from
Good, I
me
know,
on
I
it.
hear you.
Like, I'm just making that commitment.
They're small though.
Exactly.
And so they're, I think the reason why a lot of the commercial space doesn't succeed in our town because the spaces are too big and the rent's too high, and but leave it up to them. Right?
Not
They think that
necessarily.
it can happen, and I'm going to go with that.
You have small units at the Village. You had a small unit where the movie store was. It wasn't until recently that we have a boutique there. That's only open like 2 days a week or 3 days a week.
Yeah, but
So they're
you have to remember who owns that site and how they market it. I mean, it's completely apples to oranges. I mean, it's not the same.
Well, they said they're going to subsidize it, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with, trying to modify the plan right now. I'd like to allow them to do
Well,
something.
they also will be subsidizing it with the rents of the other apartments to make them less affordable because they're having to provide that commercial space.
And if we can add one more parking to what we know will probably contribute to the problem, I think that's like a great compromise as well.
We can't force that.
I don't know. I mean, because if it is successful, the commercial business in the city gets benefit from, sales tax. So
Well, one would still remain. You would have to have one.
Right.
But
Their design is, I think, balanced with the two spots,
Yeah.
and then aesthetically it doesn't work as well. So this is how they have visioned it to be.
Yeah, you
They
need
think
to
they can make it work, and let's see if they
Yeah.
can. And if it doesn't work, right? If it doesn't work, then do something else with this space. Then.
And then somebody had mentioned, additional soundproofing of these units as a, I guess, potential condition of approval. I would like to see that as well because I am concerned that if the 23 Club eventually moves forward, then these residents are going to be directly impacted. And I remember when the 23 Club was open, there were so many residents from Mariposa Street that came to us and called the police over and over again, and it was so loud for them, and their families that they couldn't sleep at night, and some of them moved off that street.
But can we put a requirement on the property because of potential sound from a business that isn't open when it's not a conjoined property anymore?
Well, I think the applicant is willing to do it. I mean, they nodded, so I don't think it's really that much of an issue. They're willing to do it and just work with staff to make it happen.
on each of the residential units or
The
within
ones
the
that
20.
the ones that would
Big
face
club.
the 23 club.
Yeah, I think the ones that are facing it.
Yeah, we can certainly work with the building official and the applicant about what kind of, whether it's certain the windows and the sound attenuation. There are certain requirements already for multifamily to achieve certain interior sound levels, so it might be a matter of how it's modeled. What you assume the ambient noise is, maybe not the ambient noise as it is today, but an ambient noise if an operation like the 23 Club were going on. So you have to attenuate down to the same level, which is, you may just have to do more because you're assuming a worse ambient condition outside.
Sure. And then, these things that we're proposing, John, I mean, so we have these additional conditions of approval. I guess it'll come back before the council, like one final thing? Or is it just, we mentioned some things here and.
Well, we could read them, I mean, not the final wording, we could read them into the record as to what, we've picked up, whether or not you want to come back on a separate consent or whatever to see the final wording. I guess I would defer to the city attorney and the council's pleasure on that. I'd be comfortable taking your language and turning them into adopted conditions, but that's your prerogative and up to the city attorney.
All right.
Okay. So let me just repeat them so we're all clear. So the additional conditions of approval that I've proposed are the electronic vehicle or neighborhood electric vehicle parking, the wall coverage or landscaping.
So would they be required to pay for the electric vehicle charging station? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we should figure out how much those cost.
Well, I think we can have these in the record, and then we can have staff confer with.
Well, that's why I was
Bring it
thinking
back.
that maybe it
wanna
comes
come
back
back?
on the consent calendar.
Yeah.
You kind of work it out with the developer, and if there's anything that if we don't think that it's up to snuff, then we could pull it.
Yeah, I
but-
think you have to, like, for the example, just for our clarification, the electric, you talked about the vehicle, the neighborhood electric vehicle, or a charger. Are you saying both? What is your intent? And then we can come up with some language for you to at least react to, might be helpful. And I assume that you mean an on-site, so you're dedicating one of their on-site parking spaces for either this vehicle or this charging station. Is that your intent, or you want?
Yeah, well, I'm a little torn because if it's on site and none of those particular residents have an electric vehicle, then they're not going to use it. So it might be better to place it on the street.
What if it's one of them cars, like we used to have it back of the police station here?
Like a golf cart?
No.
Yeah, well,
No,
the
one of
neighborhood
the-
electric vehicles
not a
are
golf cart.
small.
It's
They
like
look like
kind of
golf
like-
carts.
You're talking about the rent by the hour kind of
Yeah.
thing.
The zip car.
The zip cars that I'm assuming we don't have anymore because they weren't viable.
Correct. It was.
So to have like an electric form of a zip car.
Well, it wasn't viable.
Yeah.
It didn't get used.
Yeah.
Neither of them.
Used as much, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like the retail
Maybe it was the
business.
location.
I mean, I
there
think
were-
we should hold off and wait and see what happens in that development and who moves in and if there's a need. Because, like, I would hate to have a situation in which people are comfortable with their own cars and aren't about downsizing in that way in terms of their mode of transportation, and then we have yet another underutilized parking spot, and it can further contribute to the problem. I think this development will contribute to a parking issue further in Brisbane. So I don't want us to do anything that like exacerbates the problem.
And if it's on their property, if it's in their building, then, the one person who is using the electric vehicle always gets to park there.
Yeah,
Or do you-
exactly.
We could, well, I'm not even sure how you could do it.
And if there's a need, then maybe we can help
Well,
them get
I
a
agree with
grant.
Madison, let's just,
something.
let's see how it goes, and maybe, eventually it'll kind of morph over into that.
Yeah, maybe economically it makes sense to do that in the future.
Yeah.
If that's where the need is.
And technology changes, so you can install equipment that may evolve and you might need something else, so I think
It
we
was
should.
like out at the marina,
So,
the guy.
can I make a motion to extend the meeting to 11:45? But I need to call it a night at that because
All right.
Terry hasn't eaten dinner.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
having
so
so
we'll
much
scratch
fun,
out the
lost track of
electric
time.
vehicle parking. We'll leave that for further thought. So then it was the wall coverage, the ADA accessible features, and the soundproofing.
What wall coverage are you talking about? Because you also did recommend a mural, so I'm not sure if you would want to
No.
put like a living wall if you're planning to put a mural eventually.
I like the living wall.
like the
I'm
living
not
wall.
a big fan of the mural there.
A living wall sounds great.
But is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
wall coverage?
something to take
Soften
away,
that side.
to soften the blank
The art,
plate of wall.
part of the art program.
No, this
I
would
don't
be
think
not
that would-
part
that would
of
be
it. This
landscaping.
would just be basically like maybe a
Design-
lattice with a ivy
This is a
growing up.
design
it.
issue, right?
Right, but I don't know if.
I think we understand your
Yes.
intent. It's somewhat the planning commission expressed the same
That's
interest,
right.
and
That was one
we'll
of the-
leave it. I don't expect you to have to design the solution tonight. We can come back with some wording.
G3 gardeners, I'm sure, are willing to lend their assistance in making some suggestions.
Okay. So, are there any other conditions of approval, or?
I wanted to make sure that the changes were made on the provisions for changing to a condominium project. I think that's really important. That was, I believe, condition 34.
Correct. We got that.
We need to tighten that up.
Okay, right. So, is there a motion?
Okay, what is the motion? Because I heard two different things here too, because, I don't know if we have any type of consensus on the commercial spaces.
Well, I don't think we have 3 votes, so I don't really think it matters.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, you'll be hearing about it in the future from me if it's another dead space. Okay.
Okay.
And I would like to make it where we have the staff draw up the language and it just comes back to a consent with the understanding that it's just a tweaking of the language that we discussed.
Is that a motion?
Well, it wouldn't need to be a motion, it'd be a continuation to, I believe, to request staff to bring back with the correct language, with the corrected
Right.
conditions, that we would approve at consent.
Okay, yeah, I am in agreement.
I mean, and let the project people know where we're at, and we have a few things that we don't want to approve without their approval and their buy-in to the city, if that's okay.
Planning director is talking with the attorney about that right now, I think, or something.
Okay.
And it might be that we're denying the
We
appeal.
need a motion, yeah, what do we?
What we're thinking is it would be a motion to approve subject to the revisions that you've stated, and then directing staff to come back with the resolution that reflects those additional conditions for adoption.
Okay, I make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Can we not do the next
Yeah,
items?
What do
How
we
about
need to
the
get done?
school?
Well, the next one should be really quick, so if you want to take a shot at that, we can definitely defer new business item.
Okay.
The new business item for the after-school program to increase fees, we cannot do? Because the other one I have some concerns on.
Oh, well,
Item
let's not do
B, item
that.
B.
No, they're saying item B. You got concerns on item B?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well.
Then we should
Let's do item A then.
So,
skip
Well,
item
for-
B.
For item A, if you adopt it tonight or you adopt it on November 2nd, it'll go into effect the same day, in
Let's
January
wait.
1st.
Yeah,
yeah,
are there any
I'm not
issues
ready
on
to do
item A?
that. Huh?
Are there issues to discuss on item A? Yes?
Under new business?
You mean under public hearing?
Under new business.
New business.
Oh, new business, I got issues
After
with
school
it.
program.
Okay, let's
I got-
wait.
I got issues. I don't, yeah, I couldn't pass that tonight. I wanted to discuss that, and that's going to take longer than.
Okay.
Well, and I think we're doing disservice to the community if we're starting discussions at 11:33.
Absolutely.
I agree.
And to us.
Yeah, because I was at the Parks and Recreation.
So you said item B
yesterday,
we
it
didn't
was
have to
heavily
do, or what?
discussed.
Or,
No, you don't need to do either one.
Okay,
Oh,
so
either-
we'll skip
okay.
item B, then we'll skip item A under new business, and we'll move on to staff reports. City managers report on upcoming activities.
Got about half hour, 45 minutes?
Stop
Or,
it.
or maybe the next time.
well, we have to have a report at some time.
Is that it?
We just
Any
know
report?
how to extend meetings.
Nothing.
All kidding aside, nothing to report.
Okay. Mayor and council matters, countywide assignments, subcommittee reports.
Did we torture you enough tonight, Ivan? Oh,
Every time you come, it seems to be a long meeting.
You're jinx. All right.
Okay. City council meeting schedule. We all got that?
Why are we changing the dates?
I'm not going to
of
be in
December.
town on the 7th. That is my fault. You guys can still have that meeting. I will miss it if it's too much of a burden, but I think that would be the day that we would be swearing people in, and I would like to be there for that process.
Which month are we talking about now?
So Madison is referring to December 7th, and I just want to get back to Terry's question. So what dates do you think we're changing?
Well, it says proposed to cancel and proposed to change on the list. I have to find the piece of paper.
Okay, that was based on the conversation I had with Madison.
It's my fault.
She not her
Take
fault.
the blame.
But she had brought to me that the issue of December 7th. So
And,
we can't meet ahead
I
of
did bring
time.
this up a while ago, too.
We can't meet ahead of time because of we need 30 days from the election.
Oh.
So the 14th would make sense, and then just do one December meeting. So that's
Okay, and does that change when's the day in the park?
you mean the Christmas?
Festival of Lights?
holiday?
I'm sorry, Festival of
That
Lights.
is on the Friday or the Sunday before the 7th.
Okay, so that'd keep it in line with the other
Right.
processes.
Yeah, that's fine.
It would
So-
change it.
So we would move, instead of meeting on December 7th, we'd meet on December 14th.
Correct.
And that would be the
New
swearing
installation.
meeting.
Yeah. Installation news.
1 week later.
swearing in, yeah.
Didn't you do the Christmas thing last year, Lori?
No, that's always something that we wait
I
so
did
that
it last
the
year.
You did it
outgoing
last
mayor
year, but
does that.
Did you do it?
We changed.
No,
I did it.
it's always that we delay it so that the outgoing mayor can
Oh,
do
yeah,
that as their last
okay.
event.
Yeah, so you'll be able to do it.
Of course.
So then you'll be
There
able
you
to
go.
do
We're
it.
all
It works.
good.
That's fine with
Okay.
me. I'll stick around
You
for
did
one
it
more
last
week.
year, Cliff?
I did.
God, I was there too.
Yeah, I know.
Only gets worse.
Okay.
Made it being a senior.
You never listen
Where
to me,
is
Clark. You never pay attention when I talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Item C, written communications. Okay. Let's see. I
Got a
have
lot.
2 slips of paper. I need?
They're the same.
One is non-Baylands and one is regarding San Bruno appeal.
One was just specific to the appeal.
Do I need to read both of them, or
You
do
don't
I need to read
them at
either
all.
of them?
You don't need to read either of them.
Yeah.
Let the record show we've received
There you go.
correspondence.
That'll work.
And oral communications number 2.
Make a
No one
motion
Any
to
of you
adjourn.
would like to speak?
Second.
Wait.
In
In
closing,
memory.
we close in memory of the victims of the Las Vegas shooting and the victims of the fires in Sonoma and Napa counties.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
All in favor? Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.